So do some quick intros. This is the selling more and making more money with Microsoft 365. My name is Robert Gallup. I'm one of the partners at the CPaaS Acceleration Alliance. And what we do is we're bringing together technology providers, service providers around the world, and really sharing best practices on topics like this, which is how do I make more money? How do I get out and create more value for my customers? So we get the privilege to cherry pick things that are happening around the world and bring those back to the U.S. and then likewise sharing best practices and ideas from the U.S. back to the rest of the world so that MSPs and CSPs can find new products and ultimately significantly up their revenue. So with that, we'll go down the line and do some quick intros and then we'll get started.
Good afternoon. My name is Rayhan. I'm the CEO, President of Accordance Technology and Services here in Miramar, Florida. And I've been with the company for about 14 years. And we service pretty much all different industries from hospitality, banking, construction, all the legal side of it, all the cruise business, as well as the city, local government, and federal government.
Good afternoon. It's now afternoon. My name is Matt Siemens, CEO of NUSO. We are a full-stack service provider that delivers everything from PSTN connectivity all the way through application level. We specialize also within the Microsoft Teams environment with certified applications alongside Teams Operator Connect and direct routing solutions. We do that throughout North America, throughout EMEA, and then also just in the last few weeks, 15 countries in LATAM that we've extended to. So APAC's next. So, go from there.
Hi everyone, my name is Eric Kernais. I'm the CEO of Teammate Technology. Teammate is a Microsoft ISV, and what Teammate does is we make an integration platform that allows MSPs, CSPs, voice service providers, allows these types of businesses to integrate Microsoft Teams with whatever your communications platform might be. So we support voice and SMS and chat and a couple others, but our whole business is making Teams into something that you can sell and support.
Great, thank you, Eric. My name is David Ansell. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Reinvent Telecom. We're the division of Saddleback Communications based out of Scottsdale, Arizona. We're actually proudly owned by a Native American tribe, the Maricopa Pima Indians, based there, so kind of a unique situation. The Reinvent division of our organization is a wholesale provider of unified communications and SIP, but we have run three primary different platforms. We work with Teams and direct routing and everything that goes along with that, and we have been historically a Metaswitch shop, and then we also have a NetSapiens solution. So we provide all three platforms and help our partners go to market selling under their name in either a wholesale manner or a co-branded manner where they own those customer relationships, and many times that involves trying to make those customers happy with Teams.
All right, so why don't we start with just a quick question. How many people here are selling something or delivering something out of the Microsoft stack to their customers? How many people are selling Teams? And how many people are selling Teams voice? Pretty good portion. So, as you know, feels like overnight, but not really overnight. Teams has really become the 800-pound gorilla in the market, so it's a good opportunity to dig into that. And I guess, David, why don't we start with you? Before we get into Teams and Teams voice, why don't we start out with everything else that comes along with selling Microsoft 365 into a customer, and what other things you need to make sure are coming along for the ride?
Oh, that's a great question for us and for our partners, because we're really an enabler of our partners. Microsoft is kind of the gift that keeps on giving, because they just keep changing and iterating, and it's pretty much impossible to constantly stay up to date with everything they're doing. So one of the things that our partners have to do is they have to stay educated, but nobody can be an expert on everything Teams. There's just too many things going on. So we tend to focus on the voice side of that and then kind of guide them through areas that they might bundle the voice in. So we've had some success, we're like Viva Engage, they might look at doing that. They definitely focus on the collaboration piece and the Teams rooms. That's kind of a low-hanging fruit for them because it's really easily accessible. But then as they kind of move up the stack and the different options that are in there, some of them are more voice-centric, some of them are more MSP-centric. They might get into, Defender for endpoints. They might get into running their compliance solutions. So there's some other applications that look across the whole platform for security. So there's various things that Microsoft offer that we kind of turn them on to, but they really kind of have to lead that engagement. We just kind of support them with that. So we can't look at everything. More recently, we've also been talking to them a lot about Teams Premium and also, of course, about, Copilot. So I'm sure we'll get into that in this 45 minutes. So.
A couple bullet points from now.
Yeah, so is that a good start?
That's a good start. So quickly moving to the Microsoft Teams voice side. What are you guys seeing in the space? What are the opportunities? And I know it's always been one of those things where there's needed to be an upsell. What are some of the reasons that people aren't doing that today and how to overcome that as well?
Yeah, it's interesting. So off of what David said, a lot of the stack that Microsoft has available will bring needs in to be able to bring in different communication channels. So just as like Eric mentioned, the SMS integration, voice integration, being able to actually drive additional elements in. That's usually what happens when we work with MSPs that are currently in an account. They happen to be managing licenses for Microsoft. There happens to be a question come about how that can be integrated and be able just to extend that into the voice space. So there's a couple of ways. There's the incredibly simple way of using an Operator Connect environment to be able to go and activate telephone numbers in that space, but there's some challenges there if they actually need additional services. So if they need things like contact center or they need other elements, compliance recorders or things like that, it's more difficult to integrate those into an Operator Connect environment sometimes than through a direct routing environment. And so that's why we offer both, to be able to be as flexible as possible to the MSP, to be able to bring the solution appropriate to the customer and be able to make sure that those are, that solution is bespoke and built exactly for what the customer needs. So we've actually invested quite a bit in that space. So we've purchased software companies that now have our own intellectual property around compliance recorder, announced yesterday with AI integration and being able to pull in additional elements, using Microsoft Stack as part of the AI backend as needed, and then also a certified contact center as well across the board for the Microsoft Teams environment. So you can stay with certified solutions inside the Teams environment, inside an Operator Connect space. And those are the kind of opportunities that we see where MSPs are looking for not just simply turning voice on, but being able to create a more significant sticky solution, because the reality is if you turn the voice on, it's only as sticky if it's Operator Connect environment as it would be just selling licenses to that enterprise, which they can choose their reseller. It's difficult, but they can, so they can move around. By adding those additional features in place, it really locks them down and be able to create some additional value. We're seeing that both in the US as well as in Northern Europe as well. Southern Europe's a little bit slower for the adoption rate right now, but that's mainly in the US market, that where we all are sitting, is where we're seeing that activity.
Okay. What's, real quick on the voice side, what's the mix of customers you see coming in with Teams first and saying we need the voice enablement versus customers saying we've got voice and we're interested in Teams?
So that's a great question. So there's two parts to that. One is if they're coming into using the Teams phone system, or whether or not they're using an extension off of an existing UCaaS environment. So if they already have their own telephony environment in a hosted space, the solution we have allows for the extension of the Teams soft phone as an extension of their UCaaS environment in the direct routing space. So that will allow them to come in that direction. It's about 40% of what we're seeing on new seats turned up. And then there's the other direction where they're actually simply wanting voice turned up on Teams they already have deployed.
Rayhan, let's talk about Copilot. So the last number I saw, and this was a few weeks ago, was like a 5% adoption rate with Microsoft Copilot, even though it's deployed. What are some of the use cases that you guys are seeing with Copilot, and what are people not taking advantage of that they should be?
Yeah, so it's a great question. You know, it's something that is new to the market. You know, not every single small medium account is looking for that. It's more on the enterprise side of it. We're seeing on the healthcare side or on the larger enterprise accounts that Microsoft is pushing us as well as the clients to go into the Copilot side. So on an average, we're seeing about 5 to 6 customers on a monthly basis that have discussions and doing scope of work around what the existing environments are. It's very interesting the way the projects is being laid, you know, from the Microsoft side of it is comprehensive. It's a lot of actually utilization of the automation side of it that the customers are looking for. So, you know, it's something new. It's not something that is gonna move so quickly on a smaller scale. But on the enterprise side, we're seeing you know, about 4 to 5 customers on a monthly basis.
Okay. What do you see as the compelling use cases?
I think mostly in the automation side of it, you know, it's compliance that we're seeing, integration of different applications into Copilot. Those are the areas that we're seeing, you know, the customers are requesting to adapt changes into their existing environment.
Okay. How about the rest of the panel? Are you guys seeing any other use cases out there for Copilot?
Well, on the voice side, the primary use case is, of course, you know, having the transcription and summaries of conversations, not just meetings, but calls to the PSTN. You know, a lot of interest. I think the challenge is it's a new product, as Ryan mentioned, and it's changing a lot. So the experience is also changing for end users. So, you know, there's a little bit of friction, I think, in that regard, just in terms of driving adoption, you know, because you're not quite sure from one day to the next how it's going to improve. And of course, you know, the trend is upward, but the bumps in the road, I think, have not helped in encouraging adoption, at least from my perspective.
It also seems that it's not something that's widely adopted across an entire business. You'll end up having a few people toy with it. You know, in our organization, I think we have 5 or 6 people that turned on. We have other solutions that we've used that still seem to be significant. But for the most part, it's also very expensive in comparison to other solutions on the market right now. So that there's some price challenges, which Microsoft is recognizing and talking about.
Yeah, I definitely think that the main early applications were the transcriptions and giving you the bullet points and calling out the to-dos. I mean, I adopted it as soon as it came out. You know, I guess we wanted to try this out. But one of the things, of course, for small, medium businesses is that premium license now that includes it. It's fairly pricey, especially if you want to use it across the organization. And that is kind of preventing people from using it. And a lot of the small, medium businesses, they're spending a lot of time working in their business instead of on their business. So that's actually kind of part of what we're guiding our partners to do is we're like really leaning into the ideas of like, hey, if you're doing Teams, if you're doing these other things, you know, it's a great idea to have quarterly business reviews and then go through some of these new things because with Microsoft, it is new like almost every month, you know, it's repackaged in some new way. But that, I think that one, like, an example that I think what Microsoft is changing, like Matt mentioned, they're kind of adapting. I do think they're, you know, kind of leaning into the more agentic AI part of it, and they're going to start providing that, I think, now across the board to people in teams so they can use it kind of like as their assistant more and maybe kind of like a GPT within the business, but as part of that, because I think Microsoft recognizes it's not getting the traction. Really, I think that 5% is optimistic, actually. You know, like there's a lot of heat, but I'm not sure there's so much light right now. So,
I totally agree with you. Also, I want to add something to it for MSPs. We noticed we're actually working on a very large healthcare right now, and we're noticing the revenue potential is significantly higher than an average selling Microsoft solutions. It is something that gives you on the professional services side the scope of work, the SAL that you might develop with Microsoft in conjunction with your teams. We're seeing a higher margin upward towards 40%. So I think something that we would highly encourage to dive into it and start looking into what Copilot does and which environment. In terms of the size of the account also matters because it's costly, right? So you might have to engage the size of the accounts and the nature of the business and qualifying the needs, right? If it's compliance or the security side, there is high potential of revenue as well as margin. So just keep that in mind.
So bringing it back full circle to what are the different combinations of products? What types of bundles are we seeing out there that if you were to lead with one or two right now, what do you guys see as the most successful bundles to go in with and maybe grow with over time? Matt, you want to take it on
Sure.
as well?
So from a voice perspective, which is where we primarily live in messaging, is a combination of first taking our existing base and working with our partners to be able to talk to the end user customer to be able to say how much are you using Teams, if they already have Teams in play, being able just simply to extend their current UCaaS environment into the Teams space. And that bundle in and of itself is relatively inexpensive, allows them the ability to go ahead and continue to use their existing license and be able to pull from there. The other opportunities then are really about, and this is where margin starts to get stacked, right? So we talked about 40% margins with Copilot. You can reach those same kind of margins in some respects with just voice if you add some applications. So the applications being things like a compliance recorder. So it used to be that we just had recording, okay? And recording was just simply, you just had recording and it ran through and you just were able to listen to it, kind of go through, maybe you had transcription. The reality is though, is with the CCPA, with GDPR requirements, with things in Illinois and in DC and in New York, the reality is compliance recording, the ability to truly control and be able to have very, very finite controls about who can and can't listen to things, what can be recorded, what cannot be recorded, how long they're recorded for. Those are all very important. So we've actually deployed the team certified recorder to be able to actually take all of the collaboration pieces that are actually done, all the voice pieces, all the messaging, all of that record and be able to be deployed and reviewed. So in that environment, you can now start reaching points from a professional services perspective because now you have to design the compliance solution for your customer as well as be able to put the rest in. You can now be able to start to see the same type of margins that we were just talking about on Copilot on something that actually is on the voice side of things. And then also on the contact center side. The whole idea of CX as being a critical, I mean, I think there's probably 15 panels about CX in the conference this week. Being able to actually allow your business customers to control the way that the end user communicates and actually accesses, that whether or not through a messaging environment, whether it be Teams, WhatsApp, whether it be a federated Teams environment, whatever those elements are, all putting them into a common queue and having them then delivered into the customer as needed. Those are the types of requirements for SMB that they can't usually get. And being able to have those types of solutions now also allows you to add on significant amounts of professional services, helping them actually build that out and build that structure in place for the MSP and be able to make sure that's all tied together. So those are the kinds of bundles that we see that actually can now not just simply add revenue at 15 or 16 or 17% margins, but actually be able to add additional pieces to the stack as you go.
Anybody else have preferred bundles that you guys are leading with or sets of services?
I think the premium power services is also another value that can be added. We've seen some significant increase of our revenues, so that's something also considerable in the market that we're noticing.
I'll add, not just, Matt talked a lot about the actual applications that you can bundle together, which I agree with 100%, but also if you look at the management side of it, right? So Teams gives you a certain interface that you have to work with, in essence, to be able to manage whatever the applications are, like on the voice side, and then they just released a phone number management, but it's really very rudimentary. Being able to take outside tools from vendors like Teammate and the others up here on this panel, gives you the ability to go in and really unlock a lot more capabilities by having a much more versatile and flexible management interface. So, Teams phone numbers is one aspect of it, but you can apply that across, pretty much every vertical application within Teams, right? Because Microsoft builds these applications kind of with a certain user in mind, but that user they have in mind is not necessarily the user that, is actually sitting there trying to make it happen, right? So if you do a little investigation, there are many vendors who have, taken specific use cases depending on what your customer is doing, and allows you to be much more efficient at doing it, and you can of course charge for that efficiency.
I'm just going to add on to that, and it's not just because I'm sitting next to Eric, but one of our favorite bundles is actually the NetSapiens with the Teammates product. All right, so we've definitely sold a lot of direct routing into just Teams, and that does, I think, work well in an enterprise space. Like the early adopters were larger. If they have an IT department that is willing to do all that management, but as Matt, Eric, and both said, it takes a lot of admin competence and a lot to keep that going. But for the smaller and medium enterprise businesses, and there's like a lot of manufacturing that wants to use Teams in their knowledge worker side, but they need regular phones, and the other phone side, we've just found that this has been a really good fit for that, because it brings in some of the superior qualities of Teams voice client, and they still get the transcription. They can still leverage the call pilot, or they can use other applications. But then our partners can layer in other voice solutions. So we might, there are queues now in Teams. I would say that they're still developing. So there's definitely things we've found that work better than others. So it depends on the customer size and application. And then you kind of go from there, whether it's, the security or compliance or what have you, whatever really, that kind of comes down to our partners, level of expertise and what they focus in on.
Yeah. So Eric, when we talk about getting a customer launched, and so they've already decided they want to go forward, what are some of the issues that you see coming up commonly in terms of customer deployments, migrating across systems, migrating across phone systems?
Sure, that is actually a very challenging aspect of integrating Teams, especially Teams Phone into an existing enterprise or small business for that matter. On the one hand, you have the features, and because not every feature is going to work the same way as whatever the entity was coming from. All transfers are different, all queues are different. Everything's different. So being able to kind of parse that apart and understand what they're coming from, and having the knowledge to know what they're going into, and to be able to work through that gap or the difference is hard, and there's really no pat answer to that because every company uses the features differently. So you have to be able to have enough insight into the way they are using those particular features and how that translates into Teams. And we have maybe 10,000 companies on our platform, and still every day come up with new examples of how it's different and challenging to go from one example to another. So that's one part of it. But the other challenge, and I mentioned this a second ago, is in the administration of it, because a lot of times your people who are administrating Teams are like a different group than the people who are administrating the voice aspect of the business. So now all of a sudden you're converging, and the voice guys need to be able to do stuff on the team side, but they don't have the right permissions, or they're just not even up on how you do things in Teams because they've never had to do it before. Likewise, the Teams side who says, okay, I'm certified, Microsoft Voice certified, I understand, right, what to do, but they don't really necessarily know how it was working before on the voice side because they came from another platform. So they're kind of like saying, okay, we're going to do this. Meanwhile, the voice guys are saying, well, no, we can't do that because XYZ, they obviously have domain experience and know that. So understanding that is a major challenge and an obstacle to getting this stuff deployed. And you hear about the the lead time that it takes to make these kind of transitions happen. I mean, I hear about it all the time, you know, they were supposed to migrate in 3 months, and it's been 2 years. Most of the time, it's because of the lack of communication or the lack of insight, you know, between different groups in an organization, and kind of predetermining the roles and responsibilities that each group would have in it. So, as an MSP, you know, kind of inserting yourself into the middle of that, it really takes work, right? It takes insight, and it takes time to get that right and to plan it. And I'd say that's the most important thing that you know, should consider when going through one of these.
And just to add, when you're, as an MSP, you need to actually work with a solution like Teammate or with a service provider that has the ability to very quickly be able to make those changes. Because the reality is, in the market, there are service providers that will simply tell you, well, if you're working with me, it'll take 4 weeks to turn up a Microsoft tenant. And then you have those that will say, well, it'll take us about 90 minutes after you have it mapped out. And so making sure that you actually have the ability to also be able to mix the Operator Connect as well as direct routing solutions, where it makes sense for when you have different tenants doing different things, also has some value, so you have some ability to be able to work through that. So the management piece that Eric really pointed out is really important when you can actually, because you're going to lose all those margins if you spend all the time trying to actually manage these installations manually. You know, if you're having to write PowerShell scripts yourself and start to go through and do things, that may be a bit of a challenge. So if you have the ability to utilize systems that have already been built and use those on the platforms you're trying to get to, that's going to maximize your return on investment.
So I want to add something else to it. I know there's a lot of conversation about the voice side of it. On the security side, the challenges that we have seen and what we have faced is the global access. The moment you want to deploy Copilot, automatically you got all flags up. Security comes in and compliance and who has access. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we are facing initially in some of the accounts are delays. And yes, the 90 days, the 4 weeks process of implementation. But when you go through the cybersecurity and compliance and trying to integrate all those portion of it, other than the voice side of it, it is a very lengthy process because now you're asking for global access for other employees that they might not have clearance. So I think that's something also need to be considered. It is a process depending on what portion of Copilot you're involved. And if there's a little bit portion of the risk management or compliance, probably for the delay. So I think we're facing those challenges when we're deploying Copilot on the compliance side of it.
Along those lines, this feels like some of these turn into major change management projects. Is that fair to say? How much of your team is focused on hardcore project management, change management, in order to guide the customer through, or are you relying on the customer to do some portion of that?
I'll take that first. So generally, in our business, we're working with MSPs and CSPs, and the project management falls on the MSP or CSP, to kind of guide their customer through the process. And that, of course, is a challenge, but it's also the opportunity, right? It's because that's where your knowledge and insight and expertise about Microsoft 365 and, specifically what the expectations are, what expectations are being set will come into play. So generally, we get third level escalation of issues that are happening inside of teams that are, outside the norm, but we don't deal with the project management directly in most cases.
In our environment, MSPs that work with us, we have a customer concierge environment which allows the partner to be able to work directly with our team to be able to say, okay, we're trying to convert from this Avaya platform that's on-prem to a full team solution, and here's where we need to map it out. And we'll work through that with the partner and be able to get them to a place where they're actually able to then go ahead and help to build that out and train them on the platform to be able to do the management, to be able to actually configure and deploy that through. When it comes down to the actual project itself, that's still where the MSP is making That's where they should be making their money from a professional services perspective, doing the conversion from the one platform to the other. If it's complex, if it's more simple, then our team can assist and run through that. For the most part, that's the space. When you move into the contact center, or you move a bit bigger than that, we do have support organizations that are able to help to support that deployment and go all the way from military installations with JITC level, PRIM solutions that are integrated all the way with UCAS environments, and then as well as FedRAMP kind of deployments, which take extraordinary amounts of project management and work. So it's really a spectrum depending on where it comes from.
Turn it out to the audience. So for those of you that have sold full-on Microsoft Teams plus voice installs, how big of a deal and how mature do you feel that your change management team needs to be in order to successfully get an install out? I saw a couple of people that raised their hands that they've sold voice and Teams.
I mean, I think if it's, like you said, if it's small enough, pretty much it's not too bad, we can handle it. But we're looking at one where a customer wants to move 180 lines in Teams voice, and so that's probably, I think, where you need to make sure that you have the right team members, because it could be, you have to build all the call plans and queues and things. So I think at that point, then I would, I think then we need to make sure that you reach out to somebody that can support you.
Okay. Anybody else? Some thoughts?
Well, one thing we wish we could do is have one soft client on your PC or on this that is not only the Teams client, but can talk to our voice over IP phone system. We played around with a connector.
Yeah.
Teammate, you do that?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll find you.
Yeah, there's a couple of us on the stage too that actually have it in our network as well. So.
But that's possible. So the normally they're using Teams and they're making Teams calls within the Teams network. But like administration also wants to talk to people on the plant floor and the other people that just don't need Teams. And so one client, you can even one client that can talk to both universes.
Absolutely, yeah. That's completely possible through the teammate environment, and there are a few other direct routing environments out there, but we believe teammate does it the best from that perspective.
Connector doesn't seem to be quite like direct routing. You might be doing direct routing, but this is a station side thing.
No, absolutely. So for example, you would have a UCAS environment or a PRIM-based PBX. Those SIP trunks would run up into the network. They would interface into the teammate environment, and so you'd be able to actually call back and forth through. There's also other opportunities. Eric, I'll let you be the expert.
Yeah. So what Teammate does is we take Teams and we turn it into a registered SIP client on whatever the PBX happens to be. So, although you can get a call into Teams using a SIP trunk, you lose a lot of the features that rely on the individual identity of the SIP user, right? So things like presence and BLF and being able to park calls internally, all of those things require you to be registered on the PBX. So that's what we do. We have an app that lives inside Teams that can surface like your presence status on the PBX. We can take your status in Teams and deflect calls on the PBX. So when you're busy in Teams, calls don't come to you. And there's 30 different use cases that we focus on and specialize, but specifically with that type of environment in mind.
So, sorry, you guys, you handle BLF between PBX and so like on a secretary phone, I can see who's busy on a Teams call or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's, Rayon, you talked about security just a little bit ago. On the security side, when we look at MSPs, and we think about HIPAA compliance and GDPR and all kinds of other fun stuff, what are some of the opportunities you see on the MSP side to bring expertise and bring services along?
So from our side, I think we're seeing a lot more of a compliance and a threat detection side of it. I think that is the most important thing that most CIOs and CISOs are looking for because of simply the amount of the hacking and kind of the attacks that most businesses are facing. So, you know, from our side of it, internal, external penetration and threat compliance and threat hunting is one of the most important kind of a demand that we're seeing at a very high level. In the past 4 months, we've seen a lot in South Florida area. Some of the very large hotels got compromised, literally shut down for a month or more. There are some golf courses got hit, they're completely shut down. So we're more focused, you know, to go into compliance and looking internal, external penetration side of it, as well as compliance to see what exactly, you know, on the Microsoft, if there's anything to do with the Copilot. If not, then we have to leave with other products and services.
I'm curious, this question is actually for you. Are you doing anything with Microsoft, you know, Lighthouse or their Purview?
Not at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just curious.
From an MSP perspective, is that something you guys are investing heavily in terms of the security posture and locking things down? Who's got a security specific practice right now?
I don't have a security specific practice, but just to add on, I do think like in cybersecurity, especially as an MSP, Microsoft Teams Copilot is really great for a lot of things, but there are other products and softwares that also integrate AI that add a lot of value that also have the compliance side of it for MSPs, because not everyone is looking to go. Some people just don't like Teams. Like I've encountered some clients that say, hey, I don't want Teams, I don't want Microsoft. I prefer Zoom or this. And it really just depends on, I think, the preference of your client. But just having a variation of softwares and products to offer, I think that unlocks new opportunities.
Yeah, I would agree. In some cases, it feels like a lot of pressure from Microsoft, the product that you must have one. But there are a lot of clients that have the same feeling, like I don't want their voice, don't want to go, but I'm forced to use 365 and other solutions, and try to integrate other solutions. So I think it's just depend on what kind of business entity and clients that you're dealing with. You know, there are a lot of other product solutions out there from a security compliance standpoint as well. And we feel the same in our marketplace here in this South Florida, that customers do push back. You know, if you're constantly bragging about Microsoft, and knowing the fact, the amount of money they're pouring into the AI, almost $400 billion that they pour into, you know, Sam's company, right? And the whole drama going on right now. So I think it's a norm. I think we feel the same in some situation, in some institutions, that not everybody wants to keep all eggs in one basket. And I think that's where some clients feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, security and compliance, I think, actually are tied together as well in trying to make sure that you have digital assets deployed in certain locations that actually have access. In an international space, if you do have customers, especially if you do have customers in South Florida, you probably have customers that have different geographies that they're covering. There are certain jurisdictions that don't want recordings in the cloud, for example, that they need to be on-prem. And so you need solutions that will actually be able to have target storage locations wherever they happen to be. And so those are the types of things that from an MSP perspective, you can uncover the level of comfort they have with being able to have critical recordings they may have to have for a year or two in the cloud, and whether or not that particular solution is appropriate. So all of these areas, voice, contact center, compliance, all of those things that actually run through the voice or the Microsoft channel overall, you have the opportunity to really begin to unpack additional opportunities to sell services. And you really should, because at some point the customer is going to need a trusted advisor on more than just whether or not Outlook plugin to use. But they're going to need to really understand how the compliance and the security aspect actually works, where the digital assets live.
I do think it's interesting that Copilot and Teams would not work with Microsoft's compliance purview and not be integrated, which is what he just added. just my comment.
Well,
As security and compliance,
Yeah, yeah.
purview is your compliance.
Yeah, the compliance has more to do with roles and responsibility, and then being able to actually know where those assets happen to live. So regardless of whatever platform or structure or environment you actually use, you still have the opportunity to be able to build that for your customer and help them think through that.
Right.
So let's talk real quick certifications. When we look at security, compliance, Teams integration, what are the key certifications that the MSP should be looking at for their team to get make sure there's one, servicing the customer, and then two, differentiating in the market?
Well, of course, you know, Microsoft has certifications galore, and that's the place to start. Obviously, there are, you know, depending on the industry vertical and you know, the role of the employee, you know, where you fit into their universe. You know, so that's obviously the go-to. But I would also say, just in terms of learning about Microsoft and getting experience on their products, oftentimes it's non-Microsoft sources that are very insightful, because Microsoft being a business, you know, they're naturally pushing you towards the products that they want to push you towards. But as someone brought up, there are many ways to skin the cat. So being able to find tools and platforms outside the Microsoft ecosystem that work with Microsoft, you know, can oftentimes be lead to a more desirable result. And so there's, you know, finding those non-Microsoft sources is important. I'll mention, you know, one source that I was very impressed with is a trade show called ComC Next, which is every April. And you know, what you have there are, I went last year, and I was really impressed with the caliber of presenters there who are actually practitioners. You know, they are MSPs, and they are administrators from larger enterprises who have seen, you know, these problems in the real world, and they tell you how they solve them. Not, you know, of course it's with an eye towards Microsoft, but it's not limited to the Microsoft tools and toolkits.
So I will say again, in the ever fast changing world of Microsoft, so they have actually put Ralph Hopter. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he was over a lot of Europe. But they created a new role, the Global Small, Medium Enterprise and Channel Organization. So it's a brand new role for the SMB. So, because we tend to focus on our partners predominantly on the 500 and under, which Microsoft, I feel like, kind of tends to ignore or lead to, you know, your Pax8s and, you know, the other folks to work with the MSPs on. So there is now, they're launching like a whole new lineup of certifications for SMB, because I think they see that small businesses need to implement AI as much as the large businesses. And because the large businesses actually tend to have a legal staff that will put their foot down and stop that implementation quickly, the small businesses are much more, I don't know, should we use the term cowboys? Cowgirls, you know, but they're willing to go out and adopt quickly and break things, right? And so I think that there's this, you know, window of opportunity where it's actually not so highly regulated, where small businesses could get potentially the upper hand. So MSPs that maybe lean into some of this Microsoft training, and I can't remember all, I did read up on all of that, but I can't remember. We focused on the Teams training, which has changed multiple times, and then some of the ChatGPT and Copilot training, but and then our IT staff has done, you know, Active Directory, which also has changed. There's P1, P2 now. It's just constant, right? So yeah, there's a lots of different choices. You have to figure out where you're going to play and focus on those certifications. But there is a new one for SMB, which is exciting.
All right, make sure we get out of here and get our bellies full. You've got.
Sorry, I just wanted to add on another thing, because you asked what certifications, but I didn't hear anyone answer the question. I look for SOC 2, AICPA SOC 2 Compliance Type 2. It tells me that the company has credibility, that they're up to date with security and compliance. HIPAA, a lot of clients don't want their data being stored. Having on-prem and on-cloud solutions, or even the GDPR or ISO 2701, which are international standards for softwares. So if you're going for enterprise companies, if you have those type of clients, you need those requirements, those certifications in order to sell them one of those products or fit their needs.
Yeah, good points. So while we've got the panel up here, any questions before we head out? It's like no. All right. Well, thanks everybody for popping in. Thanks to the panelists.